The confrontation opens at the Christmas party. Father Richard Bell feels humiliated when son Michael publicly announces he gives him $8,000 a month in allowance. Daughter-in-law Sophia is subtly hostile. Before we start the story, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The champagne flutes clinked like a chorus of little bells echoing through the glittering ballroom. I tugged at the collar of the borrowed suit, its starched fabric biting into my neck. The sleeves hung past my wrists, swallowing my hands. I had borrowed it from my neighbor Joe, a man built broader than me. He was kind enough not to ask questions when I said I needed it for a family thing. I stood under the heavy chandeliers, their light falling in rivers of gold, watching my son command the room. $8,000 Michael declared his tuxedo gleaming like he'd been born in it. That's what I give my father every month, so he can live in comfort after everything he sacrificed for me. The applause was instant, thick and loud. Executives from oil companies, men who signed contracts worth more than I'd earn in a lifetime, raised their glasses in admiration. A couple of them even patted me on the back, congratulating me, as if I were lucky to be so well taken care of. My cheeks burned hot, though not from pride. $8,000. If I was getting that kind of money, I wouldn't be driving a Ford with rust blooming on the fenders. I wouldn't be eating beans out of a can most nights, hoping the electric company would give me one more week before shutting off the lights. I scrubbed warehouse floors at midnight to keep a roof over my head. My son's words weren't generosity, they were theater. And I was the prop. Michael pressed his arm around my shoulders, his hand heavy like an anchor. He grinned for the cameras, for the onlookers, for the world that believed him. My throat closed tight. I said nothing. The silence inside me weighed more than all the applause. At 57, you don't expect betrayal to come with trumpets and chandeliers, but it does. And it doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the boy you once hoisted onto your shoulders to watch fireworks explode across a summer sky. That's when I saw her, Sophia. My daughter-in-law's smile was sharp as a broken bottle. Her gown shimmered every fold, screaming money. She tilted her glass just enough to catch my eye. Her look wasn't proud. It wasn't warm. It was a dare. She knew I hadn't seen a cent of that so-called allowance. She knew, and she was testing me. Would I speak? Would I embarrass my son in front of this crowd? Or would I stay silent, play the part of the grateful father, and let the lie stand? The music swelled again, violins stretching high, and I forced my lips into what must have looked like a smile. I couldn't breathe under the chandeliers, not with the laughter and the clinking glasses drowning me out. I excused myself and walked toward the terrace, my shoes clicking on polished stone. The December air outside bit into me, sharp and clean. I leaned on the railing, Dallas's skyline stretched out before me, 1,000 windows glowing with wealth. None of those lights were mine. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from the electric company final warning. The number was smaller than what Michael had just announced to the world he gave me every month. Behind me, laughter rippled. Michael's booming voice, Sophia's soft, controlled giggle. Their words blurred together with the sound of champagne glasses clinking like a celebration of a joke. Only I didn't find funny. I thought of the hours I'd spent on warehouse floors, the smell of bleach stuck to my skin, the ache in my back from hauling crates and mopping endless corridors. I thought of Michael's tuxedo, his polished shoes, his dazzling smile as he told a room full of people that I lived in comfort because of him. It wasn't just a lie. It was theft. The glass door slid open behind me. I didn't have to turn to know who it was. Sophia's perfume floated out first, something expensive and deliberately subtle. "Richard," she said softly, her voice as smooth as marble. "Are you all right? You look pale. Perhaps the champagne is too much for you." I shook my head. I don't drink. Her eyes studied me like a flaw in a painting. Then she smiled again, a smile crafted to sell lies without cracking. Michael worries about you, you know. He always says how generous he is with you. Sometimes she paused, letting the word linger like a hook. I think he gives too much. My laugh came out low and bitter. I haven't received a penny of that money. Her smile froze for a fraction of a second. Just long enough. Then it melted back into place. Oh, Richard, perhaps you forgot. At your age, it's easy to lose track of financial details. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I may be tired, Sophia, but I'm not senile. I count every dollar because I have to. I know exactly how much I receive, which is nothing. Her eyes narrowed, her porcelain mask cracking just slightly. Well, perhaps Michael has arranged it differently. Investments, trusts. He takes care of everything. You should be grateful. Grateful. The word dropped between us like poison. She leaned in close enough that I could see the diamonds at her ears sparkle against the city lights. Family is everything, Richard. It would be such a shame if anything disrupted that. Her heels clicked as she walked back inside, leaving me alone on the terrace, the cold air pressing against my chest. In that moment, I understood. The applause inside. The lie my son told. The sharp smile of my daughter-in-law. It was never about generosity. It was about control. And for the first time in years, I felt something stirring inside me, not despair, not confusion. Something colder. Something sharper. Resolve. The December wind still clung to me when I stepped back into the ballroom. The chandeliers seemed harsher now, every sparkle mocking the grit under my fingernails. A waiter brushed past with a tray of petit fours, tiny, perfect desserts that cost more than my entire dinner budget for the week. I didn't take one. My stomach was knotted too tight. Michael caught my eye across the room. He lifted his glass again and smiled, but it was a showman's smile, the kind politicians wear when the cameras are rolling. It didn't reach his eyes. The guests began moving toward the dessert tables, laughter softening into the rhythm of farewells. I slipped away without saying another word. The coat-room attendant handed me the heavy jacket I'd worn, the borrowed suit's sleeves poking out awkwardly. I thanked him and pulled it tight against the chill as I walked to the parking garage. My Ford sat in the farthest corner, its paint scarred with rust and its heater wheezing like an old man's lungs. I slid behind the wheel, the leather cracked and stiff, and started the engine. It coughed twice before it caught. The drive home was long and quiet. Dallas shimmered in December lights, skyscrapers flashing blue and gold, restaurants glowing with holiday cheer. I passed couples holding hands, children laughing as their parents pulled them toward toy store windows. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles whitened. They were out here celebrating while I was counting quarters to see if I could afford laundry this week. By the time I pulled into the lot outside my building, the heater had given up completely. I rubbed my hands together, trying to chase some warmth back into them. The stairwell smelled of mildew as I climbed up to the second floor. My apartment was still the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, it accuses. The carpet was worn, thin patches of it unraveling near the corners. The wallpaper peeled in places, yellowing like old teeth. On the table sat a stack of bills arranged in careful order because chaos would have drowned me long ago. Electricity, rent, car insurance, grocery tab from the corner store. Each envelope seemed heavier than the last. I dropped into the sagging chair and pulled my laptop toward me. My fingers hesitated before typing in the password. Part of me already knew what I'd find, but I needed to see it anyway. The numbers appeared on the screen, glowing pitifully small. No mysterious deposits, no hidden accounts, no $8,000 allowance. My son had lied in front of hundreds. Lied to strangers who now thought I lived comfortably off his generosity. Lied while I scraped together enough to keep the lights on. The humiliation burned deep in my chest, hotter than any shame I'd ever known. My name, Richard Bell, had been turned into a prop. A story my son could use to polish his reputation while I was left living on canned beans and factory shifts. Sleep was impossible. I lay on the narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. Every creak of the old building seemed to echo inside my skull. My mind wouldn't stop circling back to the past. Michael, at 5 years old, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, pointing at the Ferris wheel, with wide-eyed wonder. His laughter had been so pure, then his small hands gripping my hair, as if I could carry him anywhere. Michael, at 18, clutching his college acceptance letter, tears in his eyes. I'd promised him I'd do whatever it took to help him succeed. I'd picked up every extra shift I could, mopped every floor, loaded every crate. Michael, at 25, standing in my kitchen asking for seed money for his first business. I gave him everything I had left, even mortgaged my future for him. And now here he was standing in tuxedos and marble halls, telling a room of strangers that he supported me with money I never saw. I turned on my side, pulling the thin blanket up to my chin. The city outside hummed with nightlife, but all I heard was Sophia's voice dripping, "Poison family is everything." It would be a shame if anything disrupted that. My heart thudded. Silence had always been easier. Silence meant keeping what little dignity I had left. But now I realized silence wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. They counted on it. They banked on it. They built their lie on it. The ceiling fan whirred above me. My chest rose and fell heavy with something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. I sat up and turned on the lamp. The light was harsh, but it steadied me. On the small table sat an old spiral notebook, half-empty pages yellowed at the edges. I pulled it toward me and wrote a single word at the top: allowance. Underneath, I wrote, "What really happened?" I scribbled down every detail I could remember from the night, the weight of Michael's hand on my shoulder, the exact words he said, the applause, the glint in Sophia's eyes on the terrace, the faint perfume of her threat. Line after line filled the page until it was crowded with ink. When I put the pen down, I stared at the mess of words. The story was no longer locked inside my head. It was on paper, undeniable. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man drowning. I felt like a man swimming toward something, even if the shore was miles away. They thought I would stay silent. They thought I would fade into the background, like fathers often do, carrying burdens without complaint. But they were wrong. I whispered the words aloud just to hear them fill the room. I'm not done. The clock ticked past 3 a.m. My body begged for rest, but my mind was alive, sharper than it had been in years. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I left the notebook open on the table and turned off the lamp, but the room wouldn't go dark the way I needed it to. Streetlight leaked around the edges of the blinds and laid a pale stripe across the bills like a measuring tape over a wound. I lay back down, shoes still on, and stared at that stripe until the phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Richard, Sophia said, voice warm the way a heat lamp feels on plastic fruit. I just wanted to make sure you got home safely. It was a long night. It was, I said. I hope you weren't overwhelmed by all the attention, she went on. Michael's friends can be enthusiastic. You know how people are around the holidays. Lots of champagne, lots of big statements, a soft laugh. Sometimes things come out larger than life. Like $8,000 a month, I said plain. There was the slightest hitch in her breath, the kind a person trains themselves to cover. Oh, Richard, I wondered if that might confuse you. Michael meant total support, and in different forms. It's not always cash in hand. Investments trusts things that don't show up in a simple checking account. I've looked at my simple checking account, I said. I look at it a lot. Nothing shows up. You have to remember, she said gently, at a certain age the details get harder to track. It's not your fault. Truly. That's why Michael handles the financial side. He worries about you. We both do. There it was again, age like a velvet rope across a doorway I wasn't allowed to pass. I can tell you the balance on my account right now, down to the penny, I said. I can tell you how much a gallon of milk cost at the corner store this morning, and how long it takes my car's heater to go from wheeze to lukewarm. I'm clear. I know you feel clear, she said, a mother-to-toddler tone wrapped in silk. But perception and capacity aren't always the same. We just want what's best. What's best, I repeated, and let the words sit on the line long enough to gather weight. What's best would be to stop saying things that aren't true. Silence. Then the porcelain smile in her voice returned. This is delicate, Richard. Family is delicate. It would be unfortunate if private matters became public. People misunderstand. They judge. Michael's business depends on reputation. Yours does too, such as it is. We should keep everything in-house. My jaw worked. I could picture her one hand on the kitchen island phone, tilted at the perfect angle. Eyes flat as glass. Sophia, I said, has any money, any ever reached me from what Michael claimed tonight? It's allocated to your benefit, she said. That's how these things are structured. You'll simply have to trust us. Then lighter. You really must be exhausted, Richard. Get some rest. Tomorrow will feel clearer. She ended the call before I could return the favor. I lay there and watched the streetlight stripe not move at all. My body wanted to shake, but the shaking didn't come. Instead, a steadying cold moved in like opening a freezer and stepping inside. I picked up the notebook and wrote, "Call from Sophia, 12:41 a.m. Allocated, capacity, keep in-house reputation threats." The words looked straight on the page. I liked them that way. And once I'd written them, older scenes began to slide out of hiding, not dramatic enough to register before now loud in the mind's replay. Thanksgiving at their house 2 years back. I'd brought rolls I baked because bringing something is how you show you aren't arriving just to take. Sophia took the bag, smiled, and said to the group, "Isn't it sweet he still insists on helping? Sometimes he forgets we've already ordered everything." A laugh around the table, small, well-bred. I hadn't forgotten anything. No one told me the menu was catered. Last spring lunch after one of Michael's deals closed. The server set the bill between us. I reached for my wallet out of habit. "Oh, Dad," Sophia said brightly, catching the server's eye he paid last time. I hadn't. "We'll handle it," she told the server. Then to me softer, "You forgot, but that's okay." She turned the bill over and slid a black card into the leather folder. When the server walked away, she patted my hand as if she were closing a drawer. A pattern hides in manners until you hold it to the light. I kept writing. Thanksgiving comment. Lunch bill. "You forgot." The list lengthened. The list made me feel less alone than any person had in a long time. Because lists don't lie to save feelings. Lists don't try to be admired. I got up, pulled on my jacket, and checked the mailbox downstairs. Empty except for a flyer for a chain gym I couldn't afford. I ran my thumb along the inside edge out of reflex, the way I always did in case any envelope rode up under the top lip. Nothing. Back upstairs, I dug past the stack of bills and pulled out the plastic file where I kept the last year's statements. Each sheet had been folded and refolded so many times that the creases were starting to split. I read the deposits line by line. Wages from the grocery store, the odd overtime bump, the small direct deposits from the nighttime cleaning company. No lump sums, no monthly $8,000, no irregular transfers from anything that sounded like an investment vehicle. I set those statements beside the notebook, and before the thought could argue me out of it, wrote, "Goal, get proof they chose the story over the truth." Under it, 3 bullet points fell into place, fast and simple dates, documents, words. I underlined words. Theirs could be turned into mine if I kept them. The wind rattled the window. Somewhere above me, a neighbor coughed the hollow apartment building echo you start to know like weather. I was so tired my eyes burned, but I didn't want to sleep through whatever spine the night had given me. I made coffee too late, too strong, and drank half a mug standing at the sink. The bitterness told me I was still here. I thought back to the first time I met Sophia. Michael had brought her to my old house before it was sold the afternoon sun, laying rectangles of light across the dog-eared rug. She wore a dress the color of winter sky and shook my hand while looking over my shoulder at the mantel at the school photos and the flag in the triangle box. "This place has character," she'd said. "Not unkind, just measuring." Later that evening, when I offered to help clear the dishes, she'd said, "Please, you've done enough," and took the plate from my hands in a way that made me feel I'd done too little and too much at the same time. It isn't just lies that break a person. It's the small recalibrations, the constant nudge that moves the needle off true and calls it care. I went back to the table and added a 4th bullet, names. Who saw what? Who signed? Who handled envelopes and catered menus and club reservations and invoices? People who notice things because noticing is their job. The phone buzzed again, with a different glow, the electric company now a text and an email. Past due. Final notice. I wrote the figure onto the page and circled it not as a flourish, but like a carpenter circles a stud before he lifts the sledge. If I was going to be accused of confusion, I would be precise enough to make the accusation look foolish from a block away. The clock slid past 2:30. I swapped out the coffee for water and walked from one end of the apartment to the other to keep my back from seizing 7 long steps turned 7 back. On the 3rd lap, I stopped in the bathroom doorway and looked at myself in the mirror. The borrowed suit hung on a wire hanger from the shower rod. The jacket looked out of place under the humming light shoulders caved in on themselves. I thought about the ballroom and the applause and my son's hand pressing down. I thought about the terrace, the cold, and the word grateful landing like a bad nail. "Not done," I said to the man in the mirror. He looked back like someone you meet again after losing track for a while. I sat and wrote one more time before I let the notebook rest. Tomorrow work at the store, then the library. Ask Janet about definitions fraud theft. Ask librarian about elder financial abuse and dependent claims. Keep receipts, copy statements. Buy a cheap recorder, check state law. I knew I was getting ahead of myself. Plans are easy to write, harder to hold when morning gets in you and dulls the blade. But the outline on paper made me feel like I had handrails. Even if I only reached the first one tomorrow, it would be more than I had today. Just before I turned off the light, the phone buzzed one last time. A new voicemail from Michael. No text, just the notification dot like a small red eye. I let it sit a minute, then pressed play and held the speaker near my ear. "Dad," he said, his voice carefully level, as if auditioning for calm. "I heard you left early. I wish you'd stayed. People wanted to see you." A beat. "About what I said, I shouldn't have surprised you. I'll have Sophia set up a meeting with our planner to explain the structures. It's all taken care of. Please don't worry or speculate. It's not healthy." Another beat, then softer. "I love you." He hung up there, no callback number, no time to respond, just a recording that sounded generous if you weren't the one counting quarters. I saved it, labeled the file with the time, and wrote, "Voicemail structures, not healthy, meeting with planner." Then I set the phone face down and let the red dot blink into the dark. Sleep came in pieces when it finally came stitched together by the hum of the refrigerator and the low rolling sound of a distant train. The last clear thought I remember was a simple one. Without music or metaphor, they were building a story, and they needed me to stand still inside it. I would not. When the alarm split the dark at 4:30, the resolve had not leaked away. My body hurt the way it always did, a catalog of 57 years and too many floors mopped, but the cold steadiness hadn't moved. I pulled on my work clothes, slid the notebook into my bag, and tucked the last electric bill into the back pocket. The morning air outside smelled like damp concrete and diesel. I locked the door, checked it twice, and headed for the store. On the landing, the neighbor's door opened a crack. Mrs. Willis peered out, the chain still on. "That you, Richard?" she asked. "It's me," I said. "You bring rolls again this year." She smiled with 2 teeth and a lot of kindness. "You always do. Not this time," I said. "But I might bake something soon." "Good," she said. "People remember who brings bread." I thought about that as I made my way down the stairs and into the cold. People remember who brings bread. They also remember who takes it off the table and calls it a gift. I unlocked the Ford, slid behind the wheel, and turned the key. The engine coughed itself awake. I looked at the notebook on the passenger seat, then at the road. The plan wasn't much, but it would carry me to the next hour. And the next hour would be mine. The Ford rattled over every seam of the highway like it wanted to shake itself apart. I kept the radio off, just listening to the hum of the tires and the uneven wheeze of the heater. The streets were still half asleep, sodium lamps painting the asphalt the color of tired teeth. At that hour, Dallas belonged to the delivery drivers, the warehouse crews, and people like me, ghosts on their way to jobs that made other people's lives easier and invisible. I pulled into the back lot of the grocery store where I stocked shelves before dawn. The place always smelled the same detergent, citrus cleaner, cardboard, and something faintly sweet from a soda pallet that had split months ago. I clocked in, grabbed the box cutter, and joined the other early shift crew. Habit doesn't care about heartbreak. It asks for your hands and takes them. Slice, lift, stack, breathe. But the notebook in my bag felt heavier than the cases of canned tomatoes. Every beep of the scanner reminded me that Michael had stood in a ballroom and spoken about generosity while my wrists ached from lifting other people's food onto shelves. "Long night?" Janet asked. She was in her 60s, glasses with red frames perched low on her nose. She'd worked at the store long enough to know which light bulbs flickered and which customers always complained. Her voice was steady, the kind that could fold itself into your day without asking. "Something like that," I said. She raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Instead, she passed me a roll of shelf tags and a marker. "Here, makes the time go faster if your hands stay busy." I hesitated, then asked Janet, "Can I put a question to you?" "Shoot. If someone claimed they gave you money every month but you never saw a dime, what would you call that?" She set down the box she was cutting. Her eyes sharpened the way a teacher's do when they know the student's question is bigger than the lesson. If they're saying it to the government, I'd call it tax fraud. If they're keeping the money meant for you, that's theft. Sometimes both. The words hit hard. Fraud. Theft, not just betrayal or humiliation crimes. Janet must have read something in my face because her voice softened. "Why do you ask?" "No reason I lied, sliding a stack of cereal boxes onto the shelf." She didn't believe me, but she let it go. That's the kind of mercy some people give, not pushing when you're not ready. By the end of the shift, my body throbbed with the usual dull ache, but my mind was lit like a fuse. Fraud, theft, words that carried consequences bigger than shame. I didn't drive home. Instead, I turned the wheel toward the library. The building opened at 9, but I arrived early and sat in the car with the notebook open on my lap. Allowance. What really happened stared back at me in my own handwriting. Below it, dates, documents, words, names. When the glass doors slid open, I walked in with the small crowd students with backpacks, a man in a suit already on a call, a young mother tugging her child along. The librarian recognized me from the time I needed help printing a form. She nodded kindly as I settled into my usual corner near the window. I logged onto a computer and began searching. Elder financial abuse in Texas. Claiming a dependent without support. Tax fraud family support documentation. The results came back heavy. Legal terms, government pamphlets, articles written in language meant to intimidate. But underneath the jargon, the truth was clear. If a person claims a parent as a dependent, they must provide more than half the parent's support. If they file documents that say they provide it when they don't, it's fraud. If the parent is older, it could be abuse. I wrote everything down in the notebook. Phone numbers, terms, requirements, even the names of organizations that helped people in my situation. The act of copying them steadied me the way a carpenter steadies wood by planing it smooth. Across the room, a mother read to her little boy about a bear who couldn't sleep. His laughter rose and fell like a small wave. I thought about Michael at that age, his head pressed against my neck, asking if bears were real. I blinked hard and bent back over the page. Memories had their place, but this was about evidence. I stayed until the librarian announced closing. My hand cramped from writing. My eyes burned. But my notebook now carried more than hurt, it carried tools. That evening, I walked back into my apartment with a bag of groceries bought on discount and laid the notebook on the table. The stack of bills still waited there, but I no longer looked at them as weights meant to crush me. They were exhibits proof. I wrote one last line before closing the cover. Silence is not protection. It is permission. For the first time in a long while, I felt awake. That night, sleep stayed just out of reach, like a door cracked open at the end of a dark hall. Every time I thought I'd stepped through it, memories tugged me back. I lay on the narrow bed blanket, pulled to my chin, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound steady enough to count on. When your body refuses rest, the past comes knocking. I saw Michael at 5 years old sitting tall on my shoulders at the county fair. His sneakers thumped against my chest while he pointed at the Ferris wheel. "Higher, Dad, higher!" he shouted as though I had the power to lift him to the stars. His laughter rang in my ears, now clearer than the applause at that ballroom. Back then I'd have carried him until my knees gave out. I rolled onto my side, but the memories rolled with me. Michael at 12, bat in his hands at the local field. His helmet was too big, slipped over his eyes, but when he connected with the ball, the crack echoed like firecrackers. He sprinted for first base, arms pumping. I shouted from the bleacher's chest, swelling with pride, not caring who looked at me. I was working double shifts that summer, mopping warehouses at night, but I never missed a game. I shut my eyes tighter, as if darkness could block the real. Michael at 18, the acceptance letter from Texas A&M, shaking in his hands. He couldn't believe it. Neither could I. We stood in the kitchen together, him grinning so wide his cheeks ached me, thinking only of how I'd make tuition work. I promised him I'd find a way. That's what fathers do. I remembered signing the loan papers, the ink bleeding across the page, while the banker explained terms I barely followed. The interest didn't matter then. My boy was headed to college. He would have opportunities I'd never dreamed of. And then Michael at 25, suit too big for his frame, standing in my living room with excitement trembling in his voice. "Dad, I've got a business idea, something that could change everything." He needed startup money. I gave him what I had. When it wasn't enough, I refinanced the house. I told myself it was worth it, that every mop stroke, every aching back shift had been leading here to his chance. But now, staring at the cracked ceiling of my apartment, I realized what that chance had cost. My house was gone, my savings drained, and Michael, my son, the boy I carried, cheered, and sacrificed for, stood in front of strangers and boasted about an allowance that never existed. The betrayal sliced deeper because it wore his face. I swung my legs out of bed, bare feet on the cold floor. The clock on the stove glowed 2:13 a.m. My chest felt tight, not from exhaustion, but from the pressure of words I'd bitten back for too long. They expected me to keep swallowing it, to let the lie fatten their reputations while I wasted away in silence. That had always been the role. Fathers fade into the background, heads bowed, pride swallowed, because love demands endurance. But endurance is not the same as surrender. I padded back to the table where the notebook waited, pages spread like open wounds. I sat and picked up the pen. My hand shook, but not with weakness, with urgency. I wrote Michael at 5 County Fair, Michael at 12 baseball field, Michael at 18 college letter, Michael at 25 business loan. I underlined them one by one. Beneath the list I scrawled in darker ink, gave everything, received nothing. Tears blurred the words for a moment, but I blinked them clear. My eyes burned, my back ached, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. A realization settled over me then, as cold and steady as the December air outside. Silence was no longer an option. They thought I'd keep quiet because I always had, because I'd rather choke down pride than start a storm. But a man with nothing left to lose doesn't fear storms. He becomes one. I pressed the pen so hard into the page that the tip almost tore through. I am not done. When dawn finally scraped the horizon, I hadn't slept a minute, but I felt alive and ready. The alarm rattled me awake at 4:30, though I hadn't really been asleep. My body rose out of habit, not rest. I pulled on the polyester vest that made me invisible to every shopper who would walk by me, later tugged on work boots that pinched more each year, and stepped into the dark. The Ford coughed on the first turn of the key, then sputtered into reluctant life. The heater wheezed like a smoker blowing air that smelled faintly of antifreeze. I drove through the empty streets, the city not yet awake. Neon signs blinked over all-night diners and stray dogs nosed through alleys. The December air cut through the seams of my jacket, but the notebook on the seat beside me burned like a coal. The grocery store's back lot was already half full with delivery trucks. I punched in, grabbed a box cutter, and headed for the pallets stacked with cereal boxes. The familiar rhythm set in slice, lift, stack, breathe. The work numbed the muscles but not the thoughts. Michael's voice kept replaying in my head, 8,000 a month, said so smoothly, so publicly. Each time the scanner beeped, I imagined it was counting one of the lies. Each box I lifted felt like another month he claimed to have carried me, but didn't. "Richard, you look a mile away," Janet said. She was beside me again, her red-framed glasses sliding down her nose as she labeled the shelves. "Didn't sleep," I admitted. She studied me for a beat, then handed me a roll of tags. Hands busy, head clearer. "That's my cure." I tried to smile. It came out crooked. "Can I ask you something else?" She didn't look up, just kept her hands moving. "Go ahead." If someone claims on paper to other people that they're supporting a parent, but the parent never sees a dime, what would you call that? This time she stopped. Her glasses caught the buzzing fluorescent light, making her eyes unreadable. Then she said it, flat fraud if they tell it to the government. theft if they keep money meant for you. Either way, it's rotten. The words dropped into me like stones into water ripples spreading fast. Fraud. Theft. Not just hurt feelings. Not just a private family betrayal. Something bigger. Something that carried weight outside the walls of a ballroom. Janet tilted her head. Why do you ask? I stacked another row of boxes, buying a few seconds. Heard something at the party last night. Stuck with me. Mm-hmm. She didn't push, but her silence told me she wasn't fooled. I carried her words with me through the rest of the shift. Fraud. Theft. They fit what I had been too weary to name. When the clock finally punched me out, I didn't drive home. Instead, I pointed the Ford toward the public library again. The same librarian was there, hair tied back, a patient smile, ready for anyone who walked through the door. I nodded at her and found my usual corner. The notebook came out open to the page where I had written, "Allowance what really happened." Underneath, I added Janet's words, fraud, theft, both. Then I began to search. Elder financial abuse. Texas, dependent claim IRS support parent. Family member fraud trust funds. The screen filled with government sites, legal aid pamphlets, articles written in precise, sharp-edged language. My hand cramped as I copied notes. If a person claims a dependent, they must provide more than half the support. If they record payments that never reach the dependent, it's fraud. If the dependent is an older adult, it may qualify as abuse. Each line I wrote seemed to clear fog from my head. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't memory loss. This was law. Across the room, I heard a boy giggling as his mother read to him. The sound caught me sideways. Michael's laughter at that age had been just as bright, just as unguarded. I gripped the pen tighter until the ache in my knuckles chased the memory back where it belonged. By noon, I had filled 3 pages of the notebook. Laws, hotlines, definitions. Words that could stand taller than champagne lies. When I left the library, the winter sun had climbed high, but offered no warmth. I stood on the steps and looked out over the city. Skyscrapers glinted like coins stacked too high, ready to topple. Somewhere inside one of them, Michael sat in an office that smelled of leather and pride. He believed he'd silenced me because silence had been my habit, but silence was over. I walked to my car, slid behind the wheel, and placed my hand on the notebook. The cover was worn, edges frayed, but it held something new, now resolve, set down in ink. For the first time in years, I wasn't just working shifts to keep afloat. I was building a case. The notebook sat on the passenger seat like a companion, its pages fattened with names and words that no longer scared me. When I pulled into the lot outside my apartment, I didn't feel like collapsing into the worn armchair. I felt like sharpening the blade I'd only just picked up. Inside the room was the same thin carpet stack of bills, the faint smell of bleach that never quite left my clothes, but the air felt different. I cleared a space on the table, pushed the bills aside, and opened the notebook again. At the top of a fresh page, I wrote in bold letters, "Allowance what really happened." Under it, I started a timeline. December ballroom, Michael $8,000 a month I give my father. Applause, laughter, nods from executives. Sophia's eyes smile sharp look, daring me to contradict. My silence, terrace afterward. Sophia, perhaps you forgot. At your age, words allocated trust's capacity. Direct threat family is everything. Shame if anything disrupted that. Voicemail later that night. Michael structures, taken care of. Don't speculate. Not healthy. I wrote each word slowly, pressing the pen hard so the impression showed on the page beneath. I wanted grooves deep enough that if the ink ever faded, the record would still remain. Then I began a second list. Names. Michael Bell, son. claimed $8,000 month support. Sophia Bell, daughter-in-law, references trust's capacity direct intimidation. Janet, co-worker, defined fraud and theft clearly, witness to my financial reality. Maria, housekeeper at their home, possible witness to household financial dealings. Librarian could confirm my research patterns and searches if needed. The act of writing steadied me. My life had felt like a string fraying thread by thread. Now I was weaving it into a rope, one detail at a time. I thought about the Christmas sweater Michael had given me last year, wrapped in tissue paper. I still had it in the closet, tags on. That, along with a monthly phone call, was the reality of his support. I wrote it down: actual support, one phone call some months, one sweater at Christmas, no cash, no bank deposits. The light outside the window shifted, stretching long across the carpet. I made coffee bitter and strong, then returned to the notebook. My hand was cramping, but I forced myself to keep going. Evidence wasn't just the absence of money in my account. It was every scrap of paper, every overheard word, every small humiliation I'd carried alone. Now they had weight. I added a heading: documents to collect. Bank statements mine. Electric rent insurance bills. Pay stubs from grocery and warehouse. Tax returns to prove no such income. Any mail from Michael, Sophia, none received. When I set the pen down, the page looked crowded, almost frantic. But to me it looked like armor. The room grew quiet again. I leaned back and let the memories creep in, but this time I didn't flinch. Michael at 25 standing in my kitchen asking for money for his first business. "Dad, it's a risk, but I'll pay you back tenfold." I'd smiled proud he trusted me enough to ask. I'd emptied accounts, taken loans. Tenfold never came. Instead, here I was a prop for his reputation. I wrote that down too. 200x loan to Michael's first business. Never repaid. Led to house loss. The more I wrote, the lighter I felt, not because the past was gone, but because it was no longer a fog. It was evidence. The phone buzzed. A message from the electric company: balance overdue, shut off pending. The number glared back at me, less than 1/10 of what Michael had claimed to give me each month. I circled it on the page: electricity due $287.32, compared to claimed $8,000. My jaw clenched. The contrast was grotesque. I closed the notebook and placed my hand on the cover as if to seal it. The words inside no longer felt like rambling thoughts. They felt like testimony. And for the first time I realized I wasn't powerless. I had started a record. Tomorrow I would carry it further. Tomorrow I would stop being the man who let a lie wear his name. The morning belonged to habit. My alarm went off at 4:30, same as always. I dressed in the polyester vest, laced my boots, and carried the notebook under my arm like a lunch pail. The grocery store never cared about what lived inside my head. It cared about shelves, boxes, and barcodes. So I gave it what it asked, hands, hours, sweat. But when the shift ended, I didn't drive home. I drove to the library. The librarian gave me a nod as I came in, the kind that said she remembered me from yesterday. I nodded back and made for the corner desk by the window. The chair creaked under me. I set the notebook on the table, flipped to a clean page, and wrote across the top: research, elder financial abuse, dependent claims, trusts. Then I started typing into the search bar: elder financial abuse, Texas law, dependent parent IRS support requirement, fraudulent claims support not delivered. Trust account concealment, family fraud. The screen filled with results, government sites, PDF manuals, legal aid guides. The language was stiff but clear once I slowed down and read. I copied lines into my notebook word for word. If an adult child claims a parent as a dependent, they must provide more than half of the parent's support. Support must be measurable, documented, and verifiable. Failure to deliver support while claiming it for benefit is fraud. If the parent is an older adult, it may constitute abuse. Fraud. Abuse. Not just betrayal, but crimes with names heavy enough to hold. I paused to rub my eyes, then flipped the page. This time I made columns, what Michael claimed on the left, what I actually received on the right. $8,000 month, 0 month. Comfortable life, father well cared for. Rusting Ford, canned beans, overdue utilities. Allowance ensures dignity. Scrubbing warehouses at midnight. The starkness of the list hit me like a fist. I turned back to the computer and dug deeper. I searched for trusts. How trusts work beneficiary access. Can trusts be hidden from beneficiary? The answers were slippery, written in the kind of language accountants use to keep ordinary people guessing. But I understood enough. If Michael had set up a trust for my benefit, I should have known. I should have received statements, documents, notices. Silence wasn't an accident. Silence was deliberate. I wrote in the notebook, "If trust exists, where are the papers? Where is the money across the room?" A mother read to her son the same one from yesterday. His laughter rose in small bursts. For a second, my chest ached. I remembered Michael at that age, perched on my shoulders, asking if bears were real. The ache pressed hard, but then steadied. I wasn't writing for the boy he had been. I was writing because of the man he'd become. When my hand cramped, I stopped to flex my fingers. The notebook's pages were filling with ink, a map of the fraud that had been wrapped around me like a cloak. The librarian walked by, glanced at the spread of notes and papers. She smiled politely. "Research project." "You could say that," I murmured. "Well, good luck. The answers are always out there if you look hard enough." Her words struck deeper than she knew. I nodded throat tight and bent back to the page. By the time the afternoon sun slanted through the window, I had filled another 6 pages. I wrote a heading at the bottom of the last next step paper trail. Collect all bank statements already done. Gather bills showing late payments. Tax filings prove no such income reported. Any letters from Michael's accountant. Look for envelopes addresses, names tied to trusts. I closed the notebook, tapped the pen against the cover, and sat for a long moment. Michael had expected me to stay silent, confused, tired, grateful. But what he didn't understand was this silence had been easier only because I hadn't had tools. Now I had them. I slid the notebook into my jacket. Outside, the cold wind cut sharper than before, but it didn't bite the same way. I felt steadier. They had built a story on my back. Now I was starting to build one of my own, and this one was made of evidence. The plan wasn't elegant. It didn't need to be. It only needed to get me close enough. I called Maria first. She was their housekeeper, a kind woman who had always pressed leftovers into my hands when she thought Sophia wasn't looking. She answered on the second ring, her voice tired but gentle. "Senor Bell Maria, it's Richard. I was hoping to stop by Michael's office today. I left something behind last time, a book. Would you mind letting me in?" There was a pause. I imagined her wiping her hands on an apron, glancing toward the hallway to make sure no one else was listening. Of course. "Miss Sophia, she is not there today. Mr. Michael has meetings. I will be cleaning." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. By noon, I was standing outside the polished glass doors of Bell Financial Group. The lobby smelled of leather and money. A receptionist in a navy blazer glanced up, but didn't question me when I gave my name. Blood still opened doors, even if it no longer bought groceries. Maria met me in the hallway upstairs, her smile small but genuine. "Quick," she whispered. "He will not be back until 3. She swiped a card, and the office door clicked open. The air inside was cold, humming with electronics and order. A mahogany desk gleamed beneath recessed lights. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with business volumes and leather-bound trophies. On the far side, a filing cabinet stood half open as though someone had left in a hurry. I moved slowly, careful not to disturb more than I needed. My hands shook, but not from fear, from the weight of the moment. For years I had lived under the shadow of suspicion that maybe I was confused, maybe I had lost track. Now I was about to find out. On the desk sat a checkbook. I flipped it open, my breath catching in my throat. The payee lines were filled out neatly, one after another. $8,000, $8,000, $8,000. But not to me. Every check was made out to ST Holdings. Some had Sophia's maiden name scribbled beneath in parentheses. The signatures were Michael's, sharp and deliberate. I took out my phone and snapped photo after photo. My hand trembled so badly the first few blurred. I forced myself to steady it. Then I opened a drawer. Inside lay a letter on accountant's letterhead dated just last month. I read it twice before it settled. Confirmation of dependent support payments. Amount $8,000 monthly. Documented for tax purposes. Support payments. Documented. Fraud written in polite type. I photographed it too. The sound of footsteps in the hallway jolted me. My chest seized. I shoved the drawer closed, slipped the checkbook back into place, and pocketed my phone. Maria appeared at the door, eyes wide. Señor Rapido. I slipped past her heart hammering and forced my face calm as we walked back toward the elevator. But just as we reached the lobby, the elevator doors slid open. Michael stepped out. His suit was slate gray, his tie perfectly knotted. He looked at me with mild surprise, then a practiced smile. Dad. What are you doing here? I felt the photos heavy in my pocket. My mouth was dry, but I managed. Stopped by to see you. Maria let me in. Thought maybe we could talk. Talk? His smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Let's grab a coffee in my office. I swallowed hard. The proof was in my pocket, but the performance wasn't over yet. If I let on that, I knew he'd bury it deeper. So I smiled, nodded, and followed him back toward the very office I had just searched. Michael's office swallowed me whole the moment I stepped back inside. The smell of leather and polish clung to the air, the kind of scent meant to convince visitors that everything here was orderly, powerful, untouchable. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk, the same desk where not 10 minutes earlier I had been pulling open drawers like a thief. Sit, Dad, he said easily, loosening his tie as if to show we were just two men catching up. You caught me between meetings. What's on your mind? I sat careful to keep my hands steady on my knees. The photos on my phone weighed heavier than a brick in my pocket. I was in the neighborhood, I said. Thought I'd stop in. He tilted his head. The neighborhood. This is uptown Dallas, Dad. Not exactly on the way from your place. His smile was polite, but his eyes sharpened, calculating. He was testing me already. Just wanted to see you, I said, voice calm. Haven't been in your office before. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Well, here it is. What do you think? I looked around, letting my eyes trace the bookshelves, the paintings, the glass awards glinting under recessed lights. It's impressive, I said softly. You've done well. A flicker of pride passed across his face. Then something else, something like suspicion. Sophia said you left the party early. People were asking about you. I needed air, I answered. She told me you seemed rattled. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Was it something I said, $8,000? His hand heavy on my shoulder. The applause, Sophia's smirk, the lies. I met his eyes and forced a faint smile. No, just a lot of noise, that's all. You looked happy up there. I just wanted to ask, are you happy, Michael? The question startled him. He blinked. Happy. Yes, I said, leaning forward slightly. With all this. I waved vaguely at the walls, the desk, the empire he'd built. Are you content? He chuckled, but it sounded rehearsed. Content is a dangerous word in business. You stop pushing when you're content. Then what are you? His eyes narrowed just a fraction. Focused, determined, building something bigger than myself. Before I could reply, the office door clicked open. Sophia stepped in her heels, sharp against the floor. She was immaculate as always, a dark emerald dress hugging her frame pearls at her ears. Her gaze swept over me, then landed on Michael. "Oh," she said, voice coated in honey. "I didn't realize you had company." Michael rose, kissed her cheek. Dad stopped by. Her smile was perfect porcelain. How wonderful. I was just thinking we should schedule that meeting with the planner to explain things to him properly. Planner. The word carried weight now. I wondered if she knew I'd already seen the letter in the drawer. I'd like that, I said evenly. I do want to understand how things are set up. Sophia's smile faltered for just half a second, the way a mask slips when the strap breaks. Then it returned brighter than ever. Of course, you'll see everything is handled. Michael has been so diligent. Michael clasped his hands together. That's right. You don't need to worry, Dad. Everything's taken care of. I nodded slowly. I appreciate that. They both seemed relieved, mistaking my calm for surrender. I let them. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is cover. I glanced at the clock on the wall, rose from my chair, and said, "I'll let you get back to work." Michael stood too, walking me toward the door. "We'll have that meeting soon. You'll see how secure everything is." Sophia's eyes followed me out, sharp and watchful. In the elevator, my pulse finally quickened. I gripped my phone in my pocket, the photos safe inside. They thought they'd played me again. They didn't know I was holding the first real proof. And proof changes everything. The photos on my phone burned like coals in my pocket all the way home. Each stoplight, each stretch of freeway, I fought the urge to pull over and stare at them again. Lines of ink signatures, checks with Sophia's maiden name, ghosting in the margins. Proof. For years I had carried suspicions like loose nails in my chest. Now I finally held something sharp enough to pierce back. But proof without allies was just weight. And weight alone crushes you. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the notebook, my finger hovering over the phone. There was only one person I trusted enough to hear this before anyone else, Patrick Monroe. We'd served together on a warehouse safety board 15 years back. He'd gone on to law school, I'd gone on to mops and crates. Last I'd heard he was practicing small-time law out of an office above a print shop. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew one thing about Patrick. He believed in fairness, the way some people believe in God. I dialed his number half, hoping it had changed. "Monroe Law," a woman answered, her voice clipped. "Patrick available." My throat felt dry. There was a pause, then a familiar drawl. "This is Monroe?" "Patrick, it's Richard Bell." Another pause, softer this time. "Richard." "Been a while. Too long," I admitted. I need your ear. About something serious." His voice shifted immediately, professional but warm. "Come by. I've got a hole at 2 o'clock. Bring whatever you have." When I walked into his office that afternoon, I noticed it. First, it didn't smell like money like Michael's did. It smelled of ink and old paper. The desk was cluttered with case files, the blinds uneven, a coffee maker hissing in the corner. It felt real. Patrick stood to greet me. His hair had gone gray at the temples, but his handshake was still strong. "Good to see you, Richard." "Sit. Tell me what's going on." I pulled out the notebook, laid it open between us, then unlocked my phone and slid it across the desk. He tapped the screen, zooming in on the photos one by one. His brow furrowed deeper with each swipe. When he looked up, his eyes were sharp. "These are checks, 8 grand apiece, but not to you, to an entity. And this letter," he tapped the accountant's header, "this says they're supporting you, documented for tax purposes. Richard, this is fraud. Straight up. And given your age, if they're using you as a dependent, it edges into elder abuse territory." The word fraud hung in the air heavier than I expected. My chest tightened. I knew it was wrong. But hearing you say it like that... Patrick leaned forward. "You're not crazy, Richard. You're not confused. They're stealing your name and turning it into money for themselves. That's a crime." My throat caught. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone else to say it. "What do I do?" I asked. First thing Patrick said, flipping open his yellow pad document, everything. "Keep that notebook close. Write dates, times, names, direct quotes. Don't trust memory. Second, protect your evidence. Back those photos up somewhere safe. Third," he hesitated, tapping his pen, "you're going to need an accountant willing to go on record. Someone who can explain how these checks and trusts work. I can make an introduction." I nodded slowly, gripping the edge of the desk. Patrick studied me softer now. "Richard, this won't be easy. They'll push back. They'll try to gaslight you, tell you you're confused. But you're not. You've got the truth. And the truth matters more than their show." For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt my shoulders lighten. The notebook, the photos, the words, they weren't just scraps. They were pieces of a case. And now I wasn't carrying them alone. I left Patrick's office with the name of an accountant scribbled on a card and a renewed fire in my chest. Sophia had looked me in the eye on that terrace and told me family was everything. She was right, family is everything. And that's exactly why their betrayal would not stand. The card with the accountant's name felt heavy in my wallet, as though it carried more weight than the cash I rarely had in there. But before I could take that step, I needed to be sure that I wasn't missing anything obvious. Proof couldn't wobble. Proof had to be steady enough that no one could laugh it away. That night at the grocery store, while we stocked shelves under the humming fluorescents, I pulled Janet aside during break. We sat at the tiny table in the back room, paper cups of weak coffee between us, the smell of fryer oil clinging to everything. "Janet," I began carefully, "you ever help anybody straighten out their bills?" She chuckled, shaking her head. "Honey, I am somebody's bills, but I keep my own straight as nails." Why, I slid my notebook across the table, open to the page where I'd copied my most recent statements, income and outgo down to the penny. I need another set of eyes. I want to be sure I'm not missing something. She adjusted her glasses and leaned in, tracing her finger down the columns. Warehouse wages, grocery store checks, overtime here. And these are your monthly bills, rent, utilities, insurance. Everyone I said. She flipped a page, comparing totals. Her brow furrowed. You're running short each month. No margin at all. If there was $8,000 extra coming in, Richard, you'd be swimming in surplus. Instead, you're drowning. I know, I said quietly. She looked up at me over her glasses. This is proof. Your life shows the truth better than any fancy statement. Anyone who looks at these numbers can see you're scraping by, not living on luxury. Her words steadied me more than she knew, because for weeks Sophia's voice had lingered in my ear. Maybe you forgot. At your age, capacity isn't the same as clarity. Doubt had whispered in the quiet hours. But here was Janet, with no reason to lie, confirming in plain terms what I already knew. This is evidence, she said, tapping the page with her finger. Don't underestimate it. Paper doesn't lie the way people do. I nodded, swallowing hard. Would you, if it came to it, would you say that to someone official? Janet leaned back, studying me. Richard, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in with your son, but yes, if someone asked me, I'd tell them what I see. You're living on scraps, not stipends. Relief and shame tangled in my chest. Relief that she saw the truth. Shame that I had to ask someone outside my own family to vouch for my reality. When break ended, we went back to the floor. She stocked cans, I stacked cereal. But every time the scanner beeped, it sounded less like a machine and more like a metronome keeping time for something bigger I was composing. That night at home, I laid the bills and pay stubs across the table in neat rows, each one a note in a song of truth. Overdue notices, utility threats, rent receipts stamped late, paychecks that barely covered basics. I photographed them all one by one. Then in the notebook, I wrote a heading, Witnesses. Janet, co-worker, can testify about income bills, no signs of $8,000 support. Maria saw checks written to ST Holdings, possible confirmation. Patrick, lawyer. Confirmed evidence constitutes fraud. Names, people, not just papers anymore. The apartment was silent except for the low buzz of the fridge, but I felt less alone than I had in years. For the first time, I was building something stronger than silence. And the stronger it grew, the more I knew Michael and Sophia had built their house of cards on the assumption that I would never speak. But the cards were shaking now. The next morning, I skipped the grocery shift and drove straight to the library. The notebook lay on the passenger seat, pages bristling with notes and photocopies. My stomach twisted with nerves, but there was a current underneath. Strong and undeniable, I wasn't just gathering scraps anymore. I was pulling at threads, and sooner or later the whole fabric would show. At the reference desk, the same librarian smiled when she saw me. Back again? Doing some digging. I said, anything specific? Companies. Property records. She nodded and pointed me towards the computers. Start with the Secretary of State's database. It'll have corporate filings. For property, check the County Appraisal District. I thanked her and set to work. On the first search bar, I typed the letters I'd seen on those checks, ST Holdings. The screen flickered, then filled with filings. Registered as a limited liability company. Date of incorporation 4 years ago. Mailing address a P.O. box downtown. Registered agent a law firm I didn't recognize. But one name jumped out at me. Under managing member Sophia Taylor. Her maiden name. My breath left me in a rush. I scribbled it down in the notebook, ST Holdings LLC, managing member Sophia Taylor. The knot in my chest tightened. She hadn't even bothered to hide it deep. The checks Michael wrote for me had gone straight into an entity with her name stamped on it. I dug deeper, moving into the property search. The county's database was clunky, but it didn't take long. ST Holdings owned 3 condos in the heart of Dallas, sleek towers of glass and steel, the kind where units sold for more than I'd make in a decade. The records listed square footage tax appraisals unit numbers. I jotted every detail. 3 condos, all bought within the last 3 years, all under ST Holdings. I sat back in the stiff chair staring at the screen until the numbers blurred. I thought of the bills on my table. Electric shutoff notices, rent overdue. And then I pictured Sophia heels clicking across polished marble keys in hand to a condo purchased with money they claimed was given to me. Fraud wasn't just paperwork anymore. Fraud had walls, windows, and balconies overlooking the Dallas skyline. I copied the property records onto the library printer, tucking the pages into the notebook. The librarian walked past, glanced at the stack of papers, and said gently, "You're building quite a file." "Yes," I murmured. "I am." When I left the library, the city looked different. Every shining condo tower seemed to sneer down at me, whispering that I was nothing but a ghost in their glass, but the folder under my arm told me otherwise. Because ghosts don't leave paper trails. That evening I spread everything across my kitchen table: bills, pay stubs, bank statements, photos of the checks, the accountant's letter, and now the condo records. The table groaned under the weight of truth. I stared at it for a long while until the light outside faded to black. Then I picked up my pen and wrote across the top of a new page. They built their future on my silence. Now I'm building my case on their lies. The words steadied me. For the first time, I could see the outline of their scheme. Michael claimed to the world that he supported me. He wrote checks every month, not to me, but to an entity in Sophia's name. That entity bought condos. Their empire grew, and my name was the foundation stone. But foundations crack when the truth seeps in. And I had just opened the flood. Patrick had given me a name on a slip of paper: Patricia Langley, elder law attorney. He'd underlined it twice before handing it over, like he was giving me not just a contact, but a lifeline. Her office was in a squat brick building across from a diner that smelled of bacon grease and coffee. No marble floors, no gold lettering on the door, just a brass plaque that read, Langley and Associates. I pushed the door open and stepped into a room lined with law books and family photos. A secretary looked up from her desk, then smiled. Mr. Bell. She's expecting you. Patricia's office was modest but orderly. A ficus stood in the corner, and on the wall behind her desk hung a framed quote, "The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable." She rose as I entered, extending her hand. Richard, please sit down. Her grip was firm, her eyes sharp but kind. The kind of eyes that told you she'd seen worse, heard worse, and still believed in fighting. I set the notebook on her desk along with the folder bulging with bill statements and the newly printed condo records. My hands trembled as I spread everything out. I don't know how to explain it all neatly. But here it is. My son says he gives me $8,000 a month. He doesn't. Instead, the checks go to this. I tapped the page with the ST Holdings filings, a company in my daughter-in-law's name, and these condos, they bought them with that money. Meanwhile, I live on grocery shifts and overdue bills. Patricia adjusted her glasses and began to read. Slowly, carefully, line by line. She examined the photos of the checks, the accountant's letter, my pay stubs, the utility threats. Then she moved to the condo deeds, her brow furrowing deeper. After nearly half an hour, she set her pen down. Richard, she said, her voice steady. What you've shown me is serious. This isn't just a family squabble. This is a pattern of fraud. And because you're over 55 and being used as a dependent, it potentially qualifies as elder financial abuse. The words hit like a hammer, heavy and undeniable. Fraud, abuse, crimes with names carved in stone. She leaned forward. The checks to ST Holdings are particularly damning. Your son claims he supports you, but instead he funnels the money to an entity controlled by his wife. The accountant's letter shows they're documenting it as if it were for you. That's falsification, plain and simple. And the condos prove where the money went. This isn't just deceit, it's misappropriation of funds. I swallowed hard. So, there's a case. There's the beginning of a case, she said. But we'll need to build a pattern. Consistency. Evidence that shows this wasn't a one-time error, but an ongoing scheme. You're off to a strong start. What we need next are witnesses and corroboration. I thought of Janet in the break room pointing at my bills and saying, "Paper doesn't lie the way people do." I thought of Maria slipping me into Michael's office whispering Rapido. Names flickered across my mind like lanterns in the dark. I have people, I said slowly. A coworker who can testify I live on almost nothing. A housekeeper who's seen those checks. My friend Patrick is already helping. Patricia nodded. Good. Witnesses are vital. But I'll warn you, once they sense you're building a case, they'll try to intimidate you. They'll call you forgetful, senile, ungrateful. They may even threaten guardianship, take away your legal say over your own life." Her words cut cold because they echoed Sophia's whisper on the terrace. "At your age, it's easy to lose track of financial details." Patricia's voice softened. "That's why you must document everything. Every phone call, every conversation, every bill, every deposit, every threat. Keep your notebook close. Treat it like armor." I looked down at the notebook, the pages crowded with ink grooves pressed deep. Armor. Yes. She slid a card across the desk. "I'll be your counsel from here on out. My retainer is modest. I work cases like this because too many people are silenced. You're not alone anymore." My throat tightened. For so long I had carried the silence like a coffin on my back. And now here was someone saying, "Set it down. Let me help." I shook her hand firmer this time. "Thank you." As I walked out into the afternoon light, the folder heavy under my arm, I felt something new beneath the fear. Not just resolve. Hope. That night back in my apartment, I sat with the glow of the old laptop casting the only light in the room. The folder Patricia had flipped through was stacked neatly on the table, my notebook resting on top like a sentinel. But the silence pressed in. Evidence on paper was one thing. Having my voice heard was another. Patricia's words rang in my head. "They'll call you forgetful, senile, ungrateful. They'll try to control the narrative." What if I took the narrative first? I stared at the empty text box on the screen of a public forum. I sometimes scrolled through a place where strangers traded stories about family betrayals, fraud, and survival. No one knew me there. No one knew Michael. I could write without fear of recognition, at least for now. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. Then I began to type. "My son tells the world he gives me $8,000 a month to live in comfort. The truth is I haven't seen a dime. I work 2 jobs, eat beans from a can, and dodge utility shutoffs. He uses my name for his reputation, his tax breaks, and his wife's investments. And I stay silent because I'm told at my age maybe I just forgot." But I didn't forget. I remember every unpaid bill. I remember every night shift. Silence is not protection, it's permission. I'm done staying quiet. I hesitated before hitting post. My heart pounded so loudly I thought the neighbors might hear it through the thin walls. Then I clicked. For a while, nothing happened. I sat back, staring at the screen, feeling foolish. But then a notification blinked. 1 comment, then 3, then 20. Strangers from across the country began replying, "You're not crazy. That's fraud. Get a lawyer immediately." My brother did the same with our mother. She fought back. "You can too. Don't let them gaslight you. You know your own life." The words poured in faster than I could read. People were angry on my behalf. Voices rising in a chorus that said, what I'd long doubted, I wasn't alone. By morning, the post had gone viral. Thousands of comments. People sharing their own stories of being written out of their own lives. The anonymity protected me, but the truth inside those sentences felt like a fire finally breaking free of the ash. At work, I caught myself standing taller, moving faster. Janet noticed. "You look different today," she said as she stalked the bread aisle. I almost told her, but I kept it to myself. Not yet. The post was mine, my secret rebellion, my first strike. That night when I opened my laptop again, I found private messages waiting, offers of resources, numbers of hotlines, advice on evidence preservation, encouragement from people I'd never meet, but who knew exactly what it was to be silenced. I leaned back in the chair, the glow of the screen painting the room in pale blue. For the first time, I felt my story wasn't buried under marble floors and champagne toasts. It was out in the open, breathed into life. Michael and Sophia wanted the world to see me as dependent, confused, cared for. But the world was starting to see something else, a man not afraid to tell the truth. And truth spreads faster than lies once it finds a voice. The call came late in the evening, just as I was rinsing a chipped plate in the sink. My phone buzzed across the table, the name Michael glowing on the screen. For a second I considered letting it ring out. But something in me said, "Answer. Record this." I tapped the green button, then quickly slid my thumb across the side of the phone to start the recorder app I'd installed that afternoon. Dad Michael's voice snapped sharp through the speaker. "What the hell did you post online?" I froze, but my silence only seemed to fuel him. "Don't play dumb. Don't you dare. An anonymous story about a father and $8,000 a month. You think I wouldn't know that's you? Do you have any idea what kind of damage you could cause?" I swallowed, keeping my voice even. "Damage to who, Michael? To you or to me? To all of us," he barked. "To the family? To my business? People talk, Dad. Clients read things, investors whisper. You're spreading lies." I leaned against the counter, the cool edge biting into my hip. "Which part is a lie that I don't get the money, that I work 2 jobs to keep the lights on, that I haven't seen a dime of what you brag about? You don't understand how it works," he shot back. "It's not about handing you cash every month. It's structured. It's handled. It benefits you indirectly. That's how wealthy families operate." "Wealthy families," I repeated slowly. "And where exactly is my part of this wealthy family?" His tone shifted, edging from anger to warning. "Dad, listen to me carefully. You need to delete that post. Immediately. If you don't, Sophia and I will have to take steps. Legal steps. Do you understand what I'm saying? Guardianship." The word hovered unspoken, but I heard it in every syllable. I steadied my breath. "I understand you're telling me not to talk. I understand you're saying silence keeps the story intact. But Michael's silence isn't protection. It's permission. And I'm done giving it." For a beat, there was nothing but static. Then his voice softened, dangerously smooth. "Dad, you're confused. I get it. You've been under stress, working too much. Sophia and I just want what's best for you. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I let the quiet stretch my heartbeat, thudding in my ears. Then I said, low and steady, "I remember every bill collector, every shut-off notice, every night shift. Don't tell me I'm confused." His breath hitched just slightly before he snapped, "This isn't over." The line went dead. I stood in my dim kitchen phone, still warm in my hand, the recorder app blinking red. Slowly, I stopped the recording and saved the file. I labeled it with the date and time, then added a note in my notebook. Voicemail, call from Michael, threats of legal action, denial, gaslighting, confused, not healthy. Saved recording. I stared at the words until they settled in my chest. For the first time, I had his voice on tape. Proof not just of fraud, but of intimidation. He thought anger and threats would scare me back into silence. But instead, his words became another brick in the wall of evidence I was building. And walls, once high enough, can turn into fortresses. The next morning, I carried the recording to Patricia's office. The manila folder under my arm was heavier than paper ought to be, as if the words inside carried their own gravity. When I stepped into her office, she looked up from her desk glasses, sliding down her nose. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. "I haven't," I admitted, setting the folder down. "But I've been busy." She gestured for me to sit. I pulled out my phone, opened the recorder app, and pressed play. Michael's voice filled the small office, sharp, angry, rattling off words like delete, that post spreading lies, legal steps, and then that soft, poisonous "Dad. You're confused." When it ended, Patricia sat back in her chair, fingers steepled. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, that she said firmly, is gold. Gold, I asked. She nodded. It's exactly what I told you to expect. Gaslighting, pressure, threats of guardianship without using the word. And you handled it perfectly. You stayed calm, asked direct questions, and got him to reveal how he frames the situation. This isn't a son checking on a confused father. This is a man protecting his fraud. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So it helps? More than helps, Patricia said. She opened a file and began jotting notes. It shows a pattern. He makes grand public claims. He funnels money to his wife's company. He buys properties. And when you object, he doesn't offer proof. He threatens, dismisses, and tries to undermine your capacity. She looked me dead in the eye. Capacity is everything here. If they can paint you as confused, they win. This recording proves otherwise. You were coherent, direct, and firm. He was defensive. Her words steadied me, but they also lit something hot in my chest. For months, Sophia's voice had lingered in my ear. At your age, maybe you forgot. Now I had proof I hadn't forgotten a damn thing. Patricia slid a legal pad toward me. We're going to build you what I call a paper shield. Affidavit-signed statements, documented evidence. Each piece will protect you against claims of confusion or incompetence. We'll gather testimony from your coworker, from the housekeeper, from anyone who can confirm you live independently and receive no such support. We'll back it with bills, pay stubs, and recordings. By the time we're done, anyone who tries to argue you're mistaken will look like the liar they are. Her confidence filled the room like sunlight. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like an old man waiting to be erased. I felt like a man sharpening his case. What do you need me to do? I asked. Keep doing exactly what you've been doing, she said. Document every contact with them, save every voicemail, write down every detail, and start thinking about witnesses. We'll need affidavits, sworn statements. Janet can confirm your financial reality. Maria can confirm the checks. Even neighbors if they've seen how you live. The more voices we have, the harder it is to silence you. I wrote her instructions word for word in my notebook, pressing hard enough to leave grooves. She leaned forward, her voice softer now. Richard, I know this is painful. It's not just about money, it's about betrayal. But I want you to remember something: the truth is not fragile. Lies are. Your job is to keep building the truth until their lies can't hold. Her words hit me deep. I thought of Michael's tuxedo under the chandeliers, his arm heavy on my shoulder, the applause ringing like chains. And then I thought of the recording on my phone, his voice snapping and breaking when the lie was threatened. The lie was fragile. I left Patricia's office with more than just advice. I left with a plan. Back in my car, I opened the notebook and wrote across the page in bold letters, paper shield build, protect, endure. And for the first time, I believed I could. I called Maria the next day, my voice low, careful. I didn't want to pull her into something dangerous, but I knew I couldn't build this shield without her. She answered on the second ring, same as always, her accent warm and steady. Senor Bell, Maria, I said softly. I need to ask you something important about the checks, about what you've seen. There was a pause. I pictured her glancing over her shoulder, making sure Sophia wasn't within earshot. Finally, she whispered, I know what you ask. Yes, I have seen them. Many times. Her words alone felt like oxygen. Would you be willing to say that? To put it in writing, silence stretched long. I could hear the clink of dishes in the background, water running. At last, she said, If I sign, if I speak, they will know it was me. They will fire me. Maybe worse. My stomach clenched. I hated myself for asking. I don't want to put you in danger, but your word could mean everything. Patricia, the lawyer, she says witness testimony is stronger than paper alone. Another pause. Then quietly, I am tired of their lies, senor. They look at me like I am furniture. I clean, I cook, I see everything. They think I do not understand. But I do. I will sign. For you. I closed my eyes, swallowing hard. Maria. Thank you. We met that evening at a small cafe far from downtown, where no one who mattered to Michael or Sophia would be caught dead. Maria wore her plain gray coat, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled papers from her bag. I had asked Patricia to draft a simple affidavit, a sworn statement confirming that Maria had seen checks written monthly to ST Holdings, and never to me. She read it twice, lips moving silently. Then she took the pen, her fingers tight, and signed. When she slid the paper across the table, I felt something shift inside me, like a weight I'd carried alone had been cut in half. "You're sure?" I asked. She nodded. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was firm. "I am not afraid anymore. You deserve truth. I will stand." I slipped the affidavit carefully into the folder as though it were made of glass. "You've given me more than you know." Maria smiled faintly, then looked down at her hands. "One day maybe your son will see what he has done. But until then you must fight. For yourself." We parted outside the cafe. She walked toward the bus stop, shoulders squared against the cold. I watched her go the signed affidavit safe against my chest. Back in my apartment, I laid it on the table beside my notebook. I stared at it for a long time. One page. Just ink and paper? But that single sheet carried the weight of courage, of truth, spoken by someone who risked her livelihood to stand with me. I picked up my pen and wrote in the notebook, "First affidavit, signed Maria." Courage is contagious. And for the first time, I felt less like a man gathering scraps and more like a man building a wall. A wall of truth, brick by brick, that even Michael's empire couldn't topple. That night when sleep finally came, it was deeper, steadier. Because I wasn't fighting alone anymore. It was a Thursday night when I found the envelope. I'd just come home from the warehouse, shoulders aching, the smell of bleach clinging to my skin. I bent to slip my boots off, when I noticed it plain white slid halfway under my apartment door. No stamp, no return address. For a moment, I just stared. My first thought was another late notice, but the electric company didn't hand-deliver envelopes at 10 at night. My pulse quickened. I crouched, picked it up, and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper. No letterhead, no signature, just 4 words typed in bold black font, "Stop. Before it's worse." That was it. No explanation. No demand. Just the blunt edge of a threat. I stood frozen in the doorway, the hallway light flickering overhead. The paper felt heavier than it should, as if the words themselves carried weight. Someone had come to my building. To my door. They wanted me afraid. For a long moment I considered crumpling it and tossing it into the trash. Pretend it never came. That was the old instinct silence as survival. But Patricia's words echoed in my head. Document everything. Every threat, every word. Silence is not protection. It's permission. I laid the paper on my kitchen table, snapped a photo with my phone, then slid the sheet into a plastic sleeve from an old binder. I wrote the date and time in my notebook, underlined twice. Anonymous threat delivered 9:47 p.m. "Stop, before it's worse." My hands trembled as I wrote. But beneath the fear, something else stirred anger. They were trying to spook me into backing down. Instead, they'd given me another brick for the wall. The next morning, I carried the sleeve to Patricia's office. She examined it without a flicker of surprise, then slid it into a folder marked Evidence. "Good," she said simply. "You didn't destroy it. That's exactly what they count on, that fear will make you erase the trail. But every threat, every attempt to intimidate you becomes part of your shield. I nodded, though my stomach still knotted. It means they're watching me, coming to my door. It means, she corrected her tone, calm but firm, that you're making them nervous. And nervous people make mistakes. I sat in her office, clutching the edge of the chair. So, what do I do? Exactly what you've been doing, Patricia said. Document, preserve, stay calm, and don't engage directly. Let them show their hand. Fear is their weapon, Richard. Truth is yours. I left her office with the folder heavier than before, but this time the weight steadied me. They wanted me rattled. Instead, they'd confirmed something I hadn't dared to believe. I was close enough to the truth to scare them. That night, I propped the notebook open beside my bed. Before I turned off the lamp, I wrote, "They tried to silence me. All they did was prove I'm being heard." Sleep came slow, but it came with a strange kind of strength. Because fear, once named and written down, loses half its teeth. The threat note stayed in my mind like a splinter, but it didn't stop me. If anything, it drove me harder. I woke the next morning with a single thought: follow the money further. The condo records I'd printed from the county website were spread across my table. 3 addresses, 3 unit numbers, all under ST Holdings. I decided to see one of them with my own eyes. By afternoon, I was standing on a polished marble sidewalk in front of a gleaming glass tower downtown. The kind of place where the valet stand was staffed by young men in black vests, where doormen in crisp uniforms held open brass-handled doors. My reflection in the mirrored glass looked out of place: warehouse boots, worn jacket, lines of fatigue etched in my face. But I straightened my shoulders and walked inside. The lobby was cavernous ceiling, soaring with chandeliers that looked like falling stars. A concierge sat behind a sleek granite desk, her smile automatic. "Can I help you, sir?" I laid one of the printed property records on the desk. "I'm doing a bit of research, looking into this unit. It says here it's owned by ST Holdings. I was hoping to confirm." Her smile faltered just slightly before she smoothed it back into place. "I'm afraid ownership details are private." I tapped the page. "This is from the county database. Public record. I just want to be sure I'm reading it right." She hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Yes, sir, that's correct. ST Holdings owns that unit, and 2 others in this building." I nodded, my chest tightening. "Do you know who manages it? Who actually lives there again?" The hesitation. Her eyes flicked towards the security camera above her, then back at me. I couldn't say. But I've seen a woman, dark hair, usually in designer coats. She signs things as Mrs. Taylor, Sophia's maiden name. I thanked her quietly and folded the papers back into my jacket. As I stepped back outside, the winter air slapped me clean. I stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the shining glass tower. Dozens of units reflected the sunlight, but I knew exactly which 3 were mine. Not mine to live in, but mine in name, stolen from me. On the drive home, I couldn't shake the image: Sophia walking these hallways, heels tapping marble sliding keys into doors, bought with money that was supposed to be mine. Condos gleaming while I boiled beans in a pot dented with age. Back at my apartment, I opened the notebook and wrote, "Condo confirmation concierge verified 3 units under ST Holdings. Occupant uses name Mrs. Taylor." I slid the printouts and my fresh notes into Patricia's folder. Each page was another nail in the coffin of their lie. The envelope with the threat note still sat in its plastic sleeve at the edge of the table. I looked at it, then back at the condo papers. Fear and fury wrestled inside me, but fury won. They had stolen my name to buy towers of glass. But I was learning how to turn glass into evidence, fragile, yes, but sharp enough to cut. And I was ready to bleed them with it. Michael called on a Friday morning, his voice sugar slick, as if our last heated exchange had never happened. Dad, he said brightly. Sophia and I thought it might be nice to have lunch together. Clear the air. There's a table at the club with your name on it. The club. Walnut-paneled dining rooms, waiters in starched white jackets, ceilings so high the chandeliers looked like stars caught in cages. I hadn't set foot in there since Michael's wedding reception, but now he wanted me at his table. Sure, I said, my tone steady, neutral. I'll come. When I arrived, a valet whisked away my rusted Ford like it was a trespasser. Inside, the maitre d' led me past a sea of murmuring executives and perfumed wives to a corner table set with gleaming silver. Michael stood as I approached, perfectly tailored in navy smile plastered on like campaign paint. Sophia was already seated, emerald scarf draped loosely around her shoulders, her eyes cool and assessing. Dad, Michael said warmly, "Good to see you." I sat folding my hands on the white tablecloth. The waiter poured sparkling water, retreated. Michael leaned in. "We're worried about you. These online posts, these rumors. People are talking and it doesn't look good. We just want to make sure you're okay." Sophia touched his arm, then looked at me. "Richard, we love you. But you're letting paranoia cloud your judgment. This isn't healthy." I let the silence hang. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and placed 3 sheets of paper on the table. The waiter passed by. I covered the pages lightly with my hand until he was gone. Then I slid them forward. Photocopies of the checks, each one for $8,000 each one, to ST Holdings. Their faces didn't move, but their eyes did. A flicker, a tightening. Next, I laid down the accountant's letter. Confirmation of dependent support payments, documented for tax purposes. Michael's jaw flexed. Finally, I unfolded the county printout's condo deeds, all 3 listed under ST Holdings. "This is your story," I said quietly. "This is what you've built on my name." Michael shifted in his seat, adjusting his cufflinks, though they didn't need adjusting. "You don't understand, Dad. These are structures, legal mechanisms, standard practice in business. Structures," I repeated. "Funny how every structure seems to build higher walls for you and none for me." Sophia leaned forward, her smile brittle. "Richard, you're misunderstanding. These holdings, these trusts are designed for your benefit, for tax efficiency. You don't see it directly, but it helps." I held her gaze, my voice steady. "Help looks like paid bills. Food on the table, lights that don't flicker. I've seen none of that. But I've seen these condos. I've seen your name, Sophia Taylor, right there on the filings. Don't tell me I'm confused." Her mask cracked then, just slightly. A twitch at the corner of her mouth, a flash of annoyance before the smile returned. Michael's tone hardened. "You've been digging where you don't belong." I leaned back, folded my arms. "It's my name, my life, my dignity. I belong in every inch of it." The silence at the table grew thick, heavy. Other patrons chatted over martinis and salmon, oblivious to the battle playing out over my papers. Finally, Michael exhaled, slow, controlled. "Dad, let's not make this messy. I'll have Sophia set up another meeting with the planner. You'll see it all explained properly." I gathered my papers, calmly slid them back into my jacket. "I've seen enough." I stood. "Enjoy your lunch." And I walked out past the chandeliers, past the murmuring voices, past the valet who scrambled to bring me my rusted Ford. As I drove away, my hands trembled not from fear but from adrenaline. For once I hadn't sat silent at their table. For once I had placed truth in front of them and watched their faces strain to hold their masks. The cracks were there, and cracks given enough pressure always spread. That night, back in my apartment, I couldn't sit still. The club's polished wood and chandeliers still clung to my skin like a film, but so did the memory of Michael's jaw tightening, Sophia's brittle smile cracking for just an instant. For years, they'd owned the stage, delivering their lines while I stood as a silent prop. But today, I'd spoken my part, and the silence had shifted. I opened my laptop, the hum of its old fan filling the room. My first anonymous post had lit a spark. This time I wanted to strike a match. I began to type not with anger, but with clarity, the way Patricia had taught me. Calm, steady, undeniable. What do you do when your own child lies about supporting you? When they tell the world you live on comfort and dignity, but you're eating beans by candlelight because the power's been cut off? What do you call it? When money claimed to support a parent buys luxury condos instead. Is silence loyalty? Or is it surrender? Does family mean protecting lies or defending truth? I read it twice, then 3 times, hands trembling over the keys. Then I hit post. For a while the screen stayed quiet. Then the notifications started to climb. Comments, shares, reactions. My words spread faster than I could keep up with, bouncing across forums, social media feeds, even news aggregators. This is financial abuse, plain and simple. I went through the same thing. Stay strong, you're not alone. If this is real, whoever did it should be exposed. Truth over image, always. By midnight, the post had gone viral. People weren't just commenting, they were debating. Some argued about family loyalty, others about justice. But beneath it all ran a current I hadn't felt in years. Strangers believed me. The next morning at work, Janet cornered me in the bread aisle. "Richard." She said, her voice low. "Is that post making the rounds?" "Yours?" I hesitated. Her eyes were kind but steady. She already knew. "Yes," I whispered. She put a hand on my arm. "Then don't you dare stop. You've got people listening now. That's power." Her words settled in my chest like steel. That evening, I opened my laptop again. Thousands more comments had poured in, people sharing their own stories of being erased, silenced, betrayed by family for money. My quiet testimony had become a mirror for others. For the first time, I realized this fight wasn't only mine. Michael and Sophia wanted to control the narrative. But the narrative was slipping, flooding beyond their grip, carried on the voices of strangers who knew the weight of silence too well. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and whispered into the dim room. They can't shut this down, because once truth finds an audience, it stops belonging to the liar. The call came the next evening, sharp and cold as a knife blade. My phone buzzed on the table, and Sophia's name lit the screen. For a heartbeat, I thought about letting it ring out. But then I remembered Patricia's words, "Document everything," and I swiped to answer, thumb-sliding quickly to the recorder app. "Richard," Sophia said, her tone low, deliberate, every syllable polished like glass. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I said. "This online nonsense stops now," she said flatly. "Whatever game you think you're playing, you're hurting your son. You're hurting all of us. Delete it." "I only told the truth," I replied, calm, steady. "No," she snapped. "You told your version. And at your age, Richard, memory is unreliable. That's why families put structures in place. Guardianship, trusts, planners. To protect people from themselves when they become confused." The word landed heavy, guardianship. She'd finally said it aloud. I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "You're saying I'm confused?" I'm saying, she purred, the silk returning to her tone, "that the more you insist on these wild accusations, the more obvious it becomes to everyone that you're not well. Judges notice, doctors notice, and once a guardianship is in place, Richard, you won't have to worry about bills or posts or decisions. We'll take care of everything. You'll be safe." "Safe," I repeated the word, sour in my mouth. "You mean silent." There was a pause. I could almost hear her smile through the line. Silence and safety aren't always different things. I glanced at the recorder, blinking red on my phone screen. Every word captured. "Sophia," I said, keeping my tone even. I may be old, But I'm not senile. I know what money I receive. I know what bills I pay. And I know where those checks go. I'm not confused. I'm clear. Her voice sharpened, venom seeping through the cracks. If you drag this family through the mud, Richard, you'll regret it. Michael will regret it. Do you really want your son destroyed because you couldn't let things be? I let the silence stretch. Then said softly, if he's destroyed, it won't be because of me. It'll be because of the truth. For the first time, her words faltered. Then she hissed, you don't know what you're starting. I ended the call without another word. For a moment, I just sat in the dim kitchen, the phone buzzing faintly in my hand. My chest ached, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of it. How close they were willing to cut, how sharp their blades had become. Then I saved the recording. Titled it, Sophia Call, Guardianship Threat. I opened my notebook and wrote, pressing so hard the pen almost tore the page. She said it. Guardianship, proof. When I slid the phone and notebook side by side on the table, I felt the fear ease into something colder, steadier. They weren't just lying. They were escalating. But now I had her words on record. And words once spoken can't be unsaid. The next morning I carried the fresh recording to Patricia's office. My hands shook a little as I slid the phone across her desk, but my voice was steady when I said, she finally said it, guardianship. Out loud. Patricia played it. Her expression unmoving as Sophia's voice filled the room, silky, poisonous, wrapping threats in words like safe and protect. When it ended, Patricia looked up at me, her eyes sharp. This is exactly what I warned you about, she said, and exactly what we needed. She revealed her tactic herself, coercion under the guise of care. This strengthens your case tenfold. I nodded, relief and weariness washing through me. I felt it when she said it. The mask came off. She wants you isolated and afraid, Patricia continued. But that's where we build the shield. You're not alone anymore. Her words proved true faster than I expected. That afternoon, Patrick met me at the diner across from the courthouse. He slid into the booth, ordered black coffee, then leaned in. Patricia called me. I've seen the recordings, Richard. They've handed you their playbook. Now it's about fortifying your position. Fortifying? I asked. Witnesses, allies, people who can confirm you're independent, competent, and not receiving what they claim. The stronger the net, the harder it is for them to cut you down. As if summoned, Janet appeared 2 days later, stopping me in the bread aisle at the store. She pressed a folded envelope into my hand. I wrote it out, she said. Inside was a statement, handwritten but clear, her testimony that I worked long hours, struggled with bills, and never spoke of any allowance. At the bottom, her neat signature. Consider that my affidavit, she said with a small smile. If anyone asks, I'll stand by it. Emotion clogged my throat. All I could manage was, thank you. And then there was Maria. She called late one evening, her voice trembling but determined. Senor Bell, I told Patricia already, but I want you to know I will testify about the checks, about what I saw. I am not afraid anymore. Her courage steadied me more than any lawyer's words could. Even my neighbor, Mrs. Willis, chimed in without knowing the full story. She caught me in the stairwell, squinting at me through the dim light. You're sharper than you let on, Richard. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. People remember who brings bread. I carried her words with me, simple as they were. One by one, the net was forming threads of truth, woven by people who had no reason to lie for me, only the strength to stand with me. That night I opened the notebook and wrote Support Network, Patricia, Counsel Strategy, Patrick, Legal Friend Advisor, Janet, Co-worker Affidavit, Maria, Signed Affidavit, Direct Witness, Mrs. Willis, Neighbor Testament to Independence, I stared at the list until the page blurred. For years I had felt like a man alone shouting into a void. But now the void was filling with voices. Michael and Sophia thought intimidation would isolate me. Instead, it had bound others to my side. And the stronger the net grew, the less afraid I felt of falling. It was late on a Tuesday when the knock came. Not the hard, impatient kind that neighbors used when they needed you to move your car, but a hesitant tap-tap, like someone wasn't sure they should be there at all. I opened the door to find a man in his 30s, hair-mussed shirt, wrinkled, clutching a folder tight against his chest. His eyes darted down the hallway, then back at me. "Mr. Bell?" he asked softly. "Yes. My name's Alan. Alan Pierce." He lowered his voice. "I used to work for your son." My pulse spiked. "You'd better come in." Inside, Alan perched on the edge of the chair, as if ready to bolt at any second. He slid the folder onto the table but didn't open it yet. "I was a junior accountant at Bell Financial. Not high up, but I saw enough. Transfers, memos, internal emails. I quit 6 months ago, couldn't stomach it anymore." Stomach what I asked, though I already knew. He opened the folder, spreading out printouts, email chains, spreadsheets, transfer lists. My son's name was everywhere. Michael Bell, authorizing disbursements, signing off on support payments, forwarding instructions to Sophia. The money flowed in neat columns, always $8,000 at a time, always into ST Holdings. One email stopped me cold. Ensure monthly checks are documented as dependent support for tax filing. Must align with affidavit on record. Do not deviate. Signed, Michael Bell. Alan pointed to the line with a shaking finger. He knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. It was deliberate. They made you a dependent on paper so they could write off the payments. But instead of you, the money funneled into her company. I stared at the page until the words blurred. To see it in his own hand, my son instructing others to carve me into a lie, was worse than any ballroom speech or terrorist threat. Alan went on. There are more. Internal memos, notes from meetings. The company called it a strategic structure. But inside, we knew it was fraud. I kept copies when I left. I didn't know what to do with them until I saw that anonymous post online. That was you, wasn't it? I didn't answer, but the look in my eyes must have been enough. Alan exhaled, shoulders sagging. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. People like them think no one will ever talk. But I will. I gathered the papers, carefully sliding them into my own folder. My voice came out rough. You don't know what this means to me. To have someone from inside... Alan gave a tight, nervous smile. Be careful. They're powerful. But paper doesn't lie. And now you have their paper. When he left, I stood over the table staring at the pile of emails and spreadsheets. Each sheet felt like a blade turned back toward its wielder. I picked up my pen and wrote in the notebook, New ally Alan Pierce, former accountant. Provided internal emails and transfer lists, direct evidence of fraud. Willing to testify. I underlined it twice. The net was stronger now. Not just co-workers, not just housekeepers. Someone from inside the machine had stepped out carrying proof. And with Alan's folder beside Maria's affidavit, Janet's statement, and my recordings, I realized something that made my chest tighten. Not with fear, but with resolve. Michael and Sophia's empire wasn't untouchable anymore. It was cracking. Patricia spread Alan's documents across her desk like a general examining a battle map. The blinds were half drawn, morning sun striping the papers in bands of gold and shadow. I sat across from her, hands clenched, watching her eyes dart from spreadsheet to memo to printed email chain. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim but steady. Richard, this isn't just fraud at the family level. This is systemic. Your son has orchestrated a scheme that runs through his entire firm. The words chilled me. Systemic. She tapped one of the emails with her pen. Look here. He didn't just lie about supporting you. He directed his staff to record those checks as dependent support. That's deliberate falsification of records. And see this transfer list. The pattern is clockwork. $8,000 out every month straight into ST Holdings. That LLC is nothing but a funnel, and his wife controls it. I leaned closer. The neat columns of numbers blurred for a second, but the truth was sharp. My son had built an empire of lies with surgical precision. Patricia continued, her voice clipped and professional. Alan's testimony is invaluable. He can confirm that this wasn't an accident or oversight, it was policy. That takes us from family betrayal to corporate fraud. And if condos were bought with those funds, that's misappropriation, possibly even money laundering, depending on how far it goes. The room felt smaller. So what happens now? We build a case file, she said firmly. Not just accusations, but airtight evidence. Alan's documents, Maria's affidavit, Janet's statement, your recordings, your bills and pay stubs. Each one is a brick, and when we deliver it, the whole structure Michael and Sophia built will crumble. I sat back, my chest tight. They'll fight. Of course, Patricia said. They'll smear you, claim you're confused, unstable, bitter. That's why we'll prepare affidavits from everyone close to you, neighbors, co-workers, even your landlord. They'll confirm your independence and clarity. We'll lock every door they might try to push open. Her eyes softened, then voice lowering. Richard. I won't lie, this is going to get ugly. They won't surrender quietly, but you've already done the hardest part. You broke the silence. Now it's about endurance. Step by step. I nodded slowly. The silence I'd carried for years had felt like chains. Now every page of evidence was another link broken. Patricia gathered the papers into a neat stack, slid them into a folder, and looked at me squarely. When the time comes, we'll take this to the district attorney, but we'll go in prepared, not as victims, as witnesses with proof. I gripped the edge of the desk. For so long, Michael had held the upper hand, spinning stories in ballrooms and terraces. But now, for the first time, I felt the ground shift beneath him. Patricia leaned back, folding her hands. Richard, your son thought he built a fortress. But a fortress built on lies is just a house of cards. And with Alan's documents, you've already pulled out the first piece. Her words rang in my ears long after I left her office. That night at my kitchen table, I opened the notebook and wrote across a blank page, strategy brick by brick. Case file grows. Fortress crumbles. I closed the cover with a steady hand. The battle had begun in earnest. Patricia called me 2 days later, her voice brisk, but carrying a current of energy I hadn't heard before. Richard, she said, we have an opening. The district attorney's office is willing to review what you've got. They won't commit to charges yet, but they're interested. That's more than half the battle. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. All the sleepless nights, all the notes, the trembling hands copying statements. Suddenly, the DA was listening. When I managed. Soon. We need to prepare a package, a single file that lays it all out, clean, chronological, airtight. If we hand them a jumble, it gets lost in the shuffle. If we hand them a story backed by documents and testimony, they'll see the fraud for what it is. At her office, she spread folders across the table like puzzle pieces. We organize it like this: introduction, brief summary of your claim. Financial reality bills, pay stubs, bank statements. Proof of hardship. False narrative copies of public claims, ballroom statement recordings of Michael and Sophia gaslighting you. Paper trail checks to ST Holdings accountant's letter, condo deeds. Witness testimony, Janet's affidavit, Maria's statement, neighbors' remarks. Whistleblower evidence. Alan's emails, transfer lists, directives, threats and intimidation, anonymous note, recorded calls, guardianship threats. She looked at me. That sequence tells a story the DA can't ignore. They'll see not just fraud, but a patterned systemic deception, elder abuse, intimidation. I stared at the folders. Each piece was a scar I'd carried, now transformed into evidence. Patricia tapped her pen against the table. You'll need to be ready, Richard. If the DA takes this up, Michael and Sophia will come at you hard. They'll hire the best attorneys money can buy. They'll spin it as a family dispute, a bitter old man lashing out. That's why we prepare a wall of fact so high they can't climb over it. Her words didn't scare me. They steadied me. Because for the first time I realized this wasn't just survival, it was justice taking shape. Patrick joined us halfway through the meeting, sipping coffee and scanning the documents. This is solid, he said, tapping Alan's emails. The DA will pay attention to insider corroboration. They can dismiss one man's word. They can't dismiss a paper trail signed by Michael himself. When we finally closed the folders, Patricia slid them into a single binder and pushed it toward me. Here it is, Richard. Your case in one hand. Don't lose sight of what this means. You've gone from silence to evidence, from doubt to recognition. The district attorney doesn't review fairy tales. They review facts. And these are facts. I left her office clutching that binder like a lifeline. The winter air outside bit into me, but I barely felt it. For months I'd been told I was confused, forgetful, fragile. Now the law itself was listening. That night, back at my table, I opened the notebook and wrote, DA will review. My story is no longer just mine. It's a case. The letters looked strong, unshakable, and for the first time in years, so did I. It began with footsteps. Late one night, as I sat at my table copying notes into the binder Patricia had prepared, I heard them slow, deliberate climbing the stairwell outside my apartment. Then silence. A pause too long to be a neighbor fumbling for keys. My chest tightened. I set the pen down, moved quietly to the peephole. A man stood just beyond the yellowed light bulb, broad-shouldered in a black jacket, staring at my door. He didn't knock, didn't move, just stood there long enough for the hair on my arms to rise. Then, as if satisfied, he turned and walked back down the stairs. 2 nights later, another, a different man, same jacket, same silent stare. This one slipped an envelope into the crack of my door before leaving. Inside was a single sheet with 3 words typed in bold, "Families eat their own." I slid the paper into a plastic sleeve and logged the date and time in my notebook. Fear gripped me, yes, but Patricia's voice echoed in my head. Every threat strengthens your case if you preserve it. Still, it wore on me. My landlord cornered me in the hallway the next week, his voice tight. Mr. Bell, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but I've had men asking about you. They wanted to see your lease. I told them no, but Richard, I can't have this building become a problem. I looked him square in the eye. I understand, but I promise you I'm not the problem. I'm the target. He frowned, unconvinced but uneasy, and left me with a warning. Keep it down, or I'll have to reconsider your tenancy. The walls felt thinner after that, every creak in the hallway carrying weight. I changed my habits, kept lights low at night, walked different routes to work, never left the binder unattended. I bought a small lockbox from the hardware store and bolted it under the floorboard beneath my bed. The binder went inside along with my phone backups and affidavits. If they wanted to scare me, they wouldn't get my evidence. One night, Janet noticed the shadows under my eyes as we stocked shelves. You're not sleeping, she said bluntly. Men have been coming around, I admitted. She set down her box-cutter hands on her hips. Then you don't face them alone. If they show up here, I'll stand with you. I've worked too many years to be afraid of a suit in a black coat. Her words steadied me more than the strongest lockbox could. I walked home that night, repeating them to myself. You don't face them alone. And when I climbed the stairs, I found another envelope under my door. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten in jagged scrawl, "Last Chance." I slid it into a sleeve, logged the time, and whispered into the silence of my kitchen. You're running out of chances too, because fear might change my routine, but it wouldn't change my resolve. The meeting was set for a Tuesday morning behind closed doors at the courthouse. Patricia called it preliminary, but to me it felt like stepping onto a battlefield. For months, my life had been scraps of paper and whispered threats. Now those scraps were bound in a single binder, and I was walking into a room where the law itself would judge if they mattered. Patricia met me on the courthouse steps. She was brisk, composed binder tucked under her arm. Remember, she said, as we passed through security, you're not here to perform. You're here to present facts. You don't have to convince them with emotion. The evidence will do that. Inside a conference room waited bare walls, fluorescent lights, a table with 3 men and 1 woman already seated. The district attorney himself wasn't there, but his deputies were their faces, serious eyes, sharp. Patricia introduced me, then set the binder on the table. She didn't open it yet. Instead, she began with a steady voice. Mr. Bell has come forward with evidence of financial fraud and elder abuse. The perpetrators are his son and daughter-in-law. I know that sounds like a family dispute. It is not. What you'll see here is systemic deception documented across multiple fronts: tax fraud, misappropriation, intimidation. She opened the binder and began laying out sections one by one. Bills and pay stubs, my income in black and white, barely enough to keep the lights on. The deputies leaned closer. Photos of checks, each one for $80,000 each, made out to ST Holdings. One of them murmured, "Consistent pattern." The accountant's letter. Proof that the payments were documented as dependent support. Condo deeds. 3 luxury units under ST Holdings linked directly to Sophia's maiden name. Witness affidavits. Janet's statement about my life of struggle. Maria's signed testimony about the checks. Even Mrs. Willis's neighborly remark confirming my independence. Finally, Alan's emails. The whistleblower's smoking gun. Michael's own words instructing staff to align checks with dependent affidavit for tax filing. The room grew heavier with each page. One of the deputies finally asked Mr. Bell in your own words, "Why now? Why come forward after all this time?" I looked at the papers on the table, then at their faces. My voice was steady. Because they built their empire on my silence. Every condo, every speech, every check, they used my name, and for years I let them. But silence isn't protection. It's permission. And I won't give it anymore. The woman deputy glanced at Patricia, then back at me. Do you feel threatened? Yes, I said plainly. Men have come to my door. Notes slid under it. My son and his wife have both told me I'm confused, unstable. They've threatened guardianship. I have recordings of those calls. Patricia slid the USB across the table. All documented. The deputies exchanged glances. One of them scribbled notes, then closed the binder gently. We'll need to verify each piece. Pull tax filings, property records, corroborate statements. But I'll say this, Mr. Bell. You've brought more than complaints. You've brought evidence. That matters. Those last 2 words echoed in me all the way home. That matters. Back in my apartment, I opened my notebook and wrote, DA review. Complete. Evidence acknowledged. No longer invisible. For the first time since Michael's hand pressed heavy on my shoulder in that ballroom, I felt something break inside me. Not my will, but the weight of being unseen. The law had looked at me, and it had listened. It was a Sunday afternoon when they came. I was sitting at my kitchen table, notebook, open steam rising from a chipped mug of coffee, when a knock rattled the door, 3 sharp raps, no hesitation. Through the peephole, I saw them both, Michael in a tailored charcoal suit, Sophia beside him, in a winter coat the color of midnight pearls at her ears. They didn't look like family. They looked like emissaries. I unlocked the door, but didn't step aside. Dad Michael said smoothly, as if we were meeting for brunch, "Can we come in?" I let the silence stretch, then pulled the door wider. 5 minutes, I said. They stepped inside, eyes flicking over my small apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the stack of bills, the sagging couch. Sophia's lips twitched, as if she were smelling something unpleasant. Michael stayed polished mask unbroken. He placed a leather folder on the table and slid it toward me. "We can end this," he said softly. "No more lawyers, no more embarrassment, just peace." I didn't touch the folder. "What's inside money?" Sophia said bluntly. "Enough to cover your bills, your rent, whatever little debts you've collected. We'll set up an account in your name, regular deposits. You'll live comfortably. In return, you drop this nonsense. Tear up your notes, walk away." Her tone was cool, rehearsed. She might as well have been offering a business deal to a stranger. I looked at Michael. "And if I don't?" His jaw tightened. "Then it gets messy. Court battles, accusations, guardianship hearings. Do you really want your last years spent in depositions instead of peace? We're offering you dignity." Dignity. I repeated the word, bitter on my tongue. I tapped the folder with one finger. "And what about the condos? The checks? The emails with your signature?" Does this folder erase those? Michael's mask slipped for just a second, anger flashing in his eyes. "You don't know what you're talking about." I leaned forward, voice steady. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. And so does the district attorney. They've already seen the binder. They know." Sophia's face drained of color, then flushed hot. "You went to the DA, yes," I said. "With witnesses, with documents, with your own words on tape." The silence in the room was so sharp, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Michael reached for the folder, but I placed my hand over it. "This stays," I said. Evidence of attempted hush money. Another brick for the wall. For the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in either of them before: fear. Small, quick, but real. "You're making a mistake," Michael said finally, his voice low. "No," I answered, standing. "I made a mistake when I stayed silent. That mistake is over." I opened the door wide. 5 minutes are up." They hesitated, then walked out, heels and leather soles echoing down the hall. When the door shut behind them, I locked it twice and slid the chain. My heart pounded in my chest, but my hands were steady as I opened my notebook and wrote, "Hush, money attempt, leather folder, cash offer," in exchange for silence. Refused. Evidence retained. I placed the folder in the lockbox beneath my bed, alongside the affidavits, emails, and recordings. The fortress they'd built wasn't just cracking now. It was collapsing. I never thought my life would end up written out in binders and affidavits, each page a scar preserved in ink. I never thought my son, the boy I carried on my shoulders at the county fair, the boy I cheered for at ball games, the boy I emptied my savings for, would one day sit across from me in a tailored suit and offer me hush money to erase the truth. But here I am. The district attorney has my case now. Patricia says it will take time, months, maybe longer. Investigations move slowly, she warns. But she also tells me I've done what most never manage. I broke the silence. I turned whispers into evidence. And that matters. I think often about the terrace that night, the way Sophia leaned close and told me family is everything, as though that absolved them of every lie. She was right about one thing: family is everything. Which is why betrayal cuts the deepest when it comes from the people who share your blood. But here's what I've learned. Family does not mean submission. Love does not mean silence. And dignity is not something someone else grants you. It's something you claim for yourself. even if your hands shake while you hold it. I look around my small apartment, the bills still stacked on the table, the old Ford coughing in the lot downstairs. By their standards, I have nothing. But I know the truth, and I've shared it. I am no longer invisible, and that is worth more than $8,000 a month ever could be. If you're reading this wondering whether to speak up about fraud, about abuse, about any injustice, hear me clearly. Silence is not protection. It's permission, and the longer you give it, the stronger the lie grows. Don't wait for someone else to hand you permission to fight. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Begin with one note in a notebook, one phone call, one voice telling the truth. The wall of lies may look unshakable, but cracks spread fast once truth seeps in. I don't know what the courts will decide. I don't know how long the road ahead will be, but I know this: my story isn't just mine anymore. It belongs to every stranger who read my words online and said, "Me too." It belongs to Janet stocking shelves, to Maria cleaning rooms, to Alan slipping me the folder that could topple an empire. It belongs to anyone who has ever been told they were confused when they knew they were clear. So here's my last word to you. Don't give silence to people who trade on your name. Don't let fear dress itself as family. You are not powerless. You are not invisible. If you've carried the weight of someone else's lie, set it down. Speak. Write. Stand. And if this story has meant something to you, if you've seen yourself in these pages, leave a comment, share your own truth. Subscribe to the fight for dignity in whatever form it takes, because the more voices rise, the less power silence has. I gave them my silence for years. Now I give the world my voice.